And good evening, everyone. Today is December 31st on the Gregorian calendar, and we're looking toward a new year. And so today I thought it'd be a good idea to just discuss what my goals are for this channel and what sort of is my idea of. I've started about 7 different books, something like that. Am I going to continue? What exactly do I have planned? Let me put it as simple as I can. So there's a lot of people out there, especially in today's society, who think that to be a true scholar, you just have to know a little bit here and a little bit there. And you just got to be able to, quote a verse here and there of the Bible, a church father here and there. And that's basically all you need to know. That's kind of the standard opinion, even among PhD graduates. The idea is you only need to skim a text and just read and kind of get the gist of it, and that's good enough. Same with students of ancient Greek when they become somewhat professional, Greek scholars. The idea is not that you can just sight read a text. The idea is that you can get the gist of it, and basically, if it comes down to looking up all the words you don't know, memorizing specific verses, slowly and surely you have all the information to put it together and kind of figure out what's going on. That doesn't sound like it's that good of an idea. Those standards are pretty low. So my idea is on this channel, I'm trying to show how someone like me, who is a classical Greek professional, more or less, I'd like to be able to show you how it's possible to take those standards up, and where exactly that goes. What does that mean? So starting off, I've read through quite a few of the church fathers. I have this book in Greek, the Apostolic Fathers, and so far on my channel, I read through all of the first epistle of Clement, and I've also read through St. Ignatius's epistle to the Ephesians. And that actually went pretty well. It was only a half hour to read the whole thing. It got a couple hundred views on that. There's 7 letters of St. Ignatius, and he is the founder of the Church of Antioch, second to Peter, the apostle. And so his letters are going to be one of the things I'm going to try to read through, all 7 letters, and then go into Polycarp. St. Polycarp also has quite a few things. There's the Polycarp's letter to Philippians, and so I can read that, as well as the martyrdom of St. Polycarp. Now, I did acquire a very ancient text. I put it in here of St. Polycarp, and I have his writings. This was printed in the 1600s, I believe, and so it's very important to realize the antiquity of this. What was it, printed in 1653? And I believe this is in Latin and Greek parallel columns. I'm going to just peek. Yeah, they're Greek and Latin parallel columns. And so one of my goals for reading as I am is to go through what are the oldest of the church fathers. And St. Polycarp is in that boat of being one of the oldest. He was a student of the apostle St. John, and so he has a very important role in the early church of really connecting a continuous church from the apostles to the 2nd century. And so that would be one of the reasons why he is so important. He was one of the main speakers against the Gnostic movement in the 2nd century, where people tried to say that there's these other epistles written by the apostles, these secret gospels of St. John, secret gospels of St. Judas, these secret gospels. And St. Polycarp was really one of the biggest spokesmen against that idea that the apostles definitely didn't have these secret gospels, and this is all nonsense. So the idea is I want to try to start at the beginning with these early church fathers, St. Ignatius, who is the founder of the Church of Antioch again, St. Clement. I've read some of St. Clement's writings. Also, St. Dionysius, the first patriarch of Athens. I want to try to get through some of that, maybe all of it if possible. And then on top of that, I have St. Ignatius is against heresies and also on the apostolic faith. Now, as far as I know, his book on the apostolic faith is not available in Greek. Where against heresies, I don't have the full text in Greek, but I have these 2 volumes which have the whole text in Latin and some of the text available in Greek too, but I don't believe it's 100%. So when we read through this, the 10 books, I'm going to be reading it in Latin and maybe go back and forth between English and Latin. And this is a very dense study. My godfather apparently has read all of the 10 books of Against Heresies by St. Ignatius, and it is brutal. It's going to take hours and hours and hours and hours, and especially if I got to read it in Latin and Greek, it's going to take a long time. But that's one goal. Get through these earliest of the early church fathers, St. Ignatius, St. Irenaeus. Did I call him Ignatius on accident? St. Irenaeus and St. Polycarp. And then also I have the writings of St. Justin Martyr. Here's my English translation of the Apologies and the dialogue against Trypho. And then I also have this wonderful text where it's actually in Greek and Latin parallel columns. And this was printed on a printing press in the good old year of, I believe it was, going to look at it, 1702, if I remember right. I was able to get this text, was housed by an Anglican bishop, 1722. So yeah, this is my text housed by a bishop of an Anglican persuasion. And this was from about 300 and something years ago, 302 years ago, printed on a printing press in Paris, France, the Greek and the Latin original, going all the way back to the first and second centuries. These writings of St. Justin Martyr would have been contemporary to Antonius Pius and Marcus Aurelius. And so, again, he would have been a contemporary of St. Polycarp and St. Irenaeus. And maybe within his childhood, he would have crossed paths with St. Ignatius, not necessarily, literally crossed paths, but he would have been alive as a child during St. Ignatius's life, and even St. John the Apostle's life. So those are going to be some of the earliest books that we want to look at. And the idea is just read the entire thing, not skipping around. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be a very time-consuming project. But the idea is we want to read through the whole thing. And now I'm envisioning anybody that listens to me is not going to be taking the same time to read the entirety of all the texts. But what I think can be noted is that it's possible to read the entirety of all these texts, given enough time allotted for a student of ancient languages. You can slowly and surely make it through these texts and be able to have a running knowledge of the early church. So, for instance, we're starting with the first century, St. Clement, St. Ignatius, those types of things. We're going to branch into the second century with St. Justin Martyr, St. Polycarp, St. Irenaeus, and Saint or no saint, Clement of Alexandria. I have Stramata. This is something where he's maybe even not a saint anymore. And so Clement of Alexandria does not get read too much anymore. A lot of people ignore him because he was the professor right before Origen kind of took over the school of Alexandria, Egypt. So a lot of people think of him as not a heretic necessarily, but a prerequisite to Origenism and Origen. And so he gets ignored. But we're going to say, let's not ignore one church father, saint or not a saint, Clement of Alexandria. I think he might still be a saint. I'm actually not sure off the top of my head. But Clement of Alexandria is a very important person for the early church. He was the professor of the school of Alexandria, Egypt, and that was in the late second century. So we're going late second century and early third century. We're going to try to read through his writings in Greek and Latin, and maybe in English too. And I got these 2 volumes of Stromata, all of his books. It's going to take hours and hours and hours, but we're going to try to do the best we can reading it. Now, I've started reading through some of this Herodian. This is a secular Roman history. We read about Commodus and that kind of thing. I'm going to try to continue that so we can get some type of a political and social aspect of what's happening in Rome during this time. And my idea is I might be skipping around a little bit from century to century, but my idea is I want to be as thorough as I can with reading about Commodus. I want to get this 2nd century stuff down as best I can. And if I can get on a roll, just wiping out the 2nd century, read everything that's possible that we have from the 2nd century. I think that should be a goal at first. And then after I read through all of the 2nd century historical documents that we have in the original Greek and or Latin, then I can branch it to the 3rd century. And that's where we have authors like Eusebius, who does do a history of the church. And there's a lot of people that have read Eusebius backwards and forwards, inside and out. I'd like to attempt to do the same thing, although read it in English and in Greek, so that I can say, okay, we've read through all of these historical documents leading up to Saint Eusebius. And then from there, if I continue to read Eusebius, is going to make a whole lot of sense, because we just read Justin Martyr about, Irenaeus's works. We've read through St. Ignatius's 7 letters. We've read through all of this. And so Eusebius then comes in to replay the history and recapture the background story. Now, from there, we also have the Athanasius's on the Incarnation of Christ. That's going to be one of the first things we're going to read when we get to the 4th century, the 300s, is on the Incarnation of Christ. I got that in the original Greek. We're going to read through on the Incarnation of Christ in the original Greek, as well as then Eusebius in the original Greek. And then when we get to the 4th century, that's when it's going to be like on overload, how many things do we have? I have here the Catechismic Lectures of this is St. Cyril of Jerusalem. Let me see if I can open up to the first page. Catechismic Lectures of St. Cyril of Jerusalem. And this is all of his catechism from the middle of the 300s. And so the idea is read through the theology. What did St. Cyril of Jerusalem have to say? Actually, they have a little icon. I have a little icon here of St. Cyril of Jerusalem. So we can have a face. We can have a face to St. Cyril, as well as read through his catechismic lectures. And then around that same time period, we also had Epiphanius of Salamis. And so I have here Epiphanius. This is the first book of Epiphanius. And then I have the 2nd book and the 3rd book. And these are all Epiphanius in Greek. And it's going to recap all the heresies, the doctrines of the church, and everything from Epiphanius's time period, which would have been right around the same time as St. Cyril, maybe a few years after St. Cyril of Jerusalem. Epiphanius, he had his famous little dispute with St. John of Jerusalem. And the idea was Epiphanius really didn't like icons in the church. And that's been an argument for Protestant iconoclasm and the idea of Protestants to say that iconography and the veneration of icons was a later insertion. We're going to take a look from Epiphanius's actual writings and read what he had to say for himself. And at the same time, when we read through Eusebius and the church history, it will have an end. At the end of Eusebius's history, it will stop. And so what I have then is Socrates, the church historian that picks up from where he left off, and we're going to go through Socrates and the continuation of church history that's going to continue down to the time of Epiphanius and St. John of Jerusalem and St. Cyril of Jerusalem and that kind of stuff. And then from that, we can branch out into Sozomen, and Sozomen then branches into the 5th century. So we can go into 5th century Greek. classical text or no, church historical text. And that's where it's going to talk about barbarian invasions of Rome, the destruction of Rome during that time period. And we can also branch out to talk about secular texts. I have several historical texts from a secular point of view written at that time as well. So we can read through the history of all of the primary sources to the 4th century, branching into the 5th century from the church historical perspective and from the perspective of secular historians. So it'd be both the historical and secular perspective, church historians, and then we're going to go from letters, sermons, homilies, like the homilies of St. John Chrysostom, commentaries. We'll read through commentaries, and then we're also going to read through anything else pertinent to that century. And the idea that I have is, why not read everything? I mean, this is a crazy idea because it's going to take, maybe years and years to accomplish that. Literally just wipe out everything and to read everything. But I think that it's actually a possibility, and it shouldn't be something that should seem like, oh, I can never read, say, all of Sozomon's history or all of Socrates' history, especially not in Greek, so I haven't tried. I think it's possible. And if I can do it, so can you. And so that's the idea. I'm not doing this to try to say that everybody should just listen to me read it aloud. Why don't you read it aloud yourself and try the same thing? Okay, if I can sit down and read all of Church Father in Greek, I shouldn't be the only one on the planet doing that. We should have multiple scholars doing the same thing. Maybe you don't want to read it aloud on YouTube. Maybe you want to read it in your own private bedroom. Go for it. Read it, either publicly or privately. It doesn't matter. But the point is, read it aloud, and read a lot of this, and don't just zoom in on one verse here and one verse there. So kind of as a capstone, and this might branch out into, medieval type stuff. I also then have I have all of Procopius's history. And so the idea is, once we finish the 400s, branch out to Procopius, read through Procopius. The secret history will be pretty interesting. And then I have right here St. Gregory of Tours. And so we could basically go right into St. Gregory of Tours, get through the 500s, and that would be kind of the capstone for early church history, branching out into medieval history. And that's sort of where my study as a classical scholar stops, is around the fall of Rome, the 5th century, 6th century, that type of stuff. So for starters, I can put out there that my first and foremost goal is to just spend the time reading and potentially discussing as well. But the most important thing is just reading those early documents of church history and getting that information all put together to have, I've read this, I've read that, I've read this, and we've put it all together. Okay, I've read all of the church fathers from the 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century, and 6th century. After I can say that I've read all of the history from all those time periods, then, of course, I could reread things that I might have forgotten, look into things that I'd like to investigate and that kind of stuff, but also maybe branch out to one idea I'd love to do is, after I get through the 5th century and 6th century, to just keep taking it century by century, all the way to the fall of Constantinople. That would be pretty interesting. It would be time consuming, but there's really not as many sources for the 6th and 7th and 8th and 9th and 10th century and 11th and 12th. So that wouldn't actually be quite as difficult. I just had to find who are the historians and what information we have, and just read it. The other thing is, I'm talking a lot about starting with church fathers and branching out into medieval historical documents. At the same time, I do have some classical pieces that I want to read through, where I've read some of Plato's dialogues, read a little bit of Aristophanes' Clouds. I want to continue to read some of the classical pieces. I read all of Herodotus, book 1, and the first 2 books of Xenophon's Cyropaedia. I want to continue to read that at the same time. So the idea is if I just keep reading and reading and reading, and especially reading aloud, it can open up the potential so that I can have some kind of a saved, let's just say, saved record of reading these texts. So I have proof. Okay, I have read these texts aloud on my YouTube channel. I have a written record. I mean, I have a recording of reading these aloud, and I can time it, see how long it's taking me, and then also be able to give others kind of an estimation on, if you would like to sit down and read all of these texts in Greek, how long is it going to take you? Is it going to take you, a couple hours a day and, take you 1 to 2 years? Is it going to take you 3 to 5 years? Is it going to take you 10 years? How long is it going to take? And as of right now, I don't know what to say. I mean, is this goal of reading everything of a church father from the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th century something I can do in the year 2025? Or is this going to take me into the next 5 to 10 years? I don't know. But even if it takes me a good 3 to 5 years or more, I believe it's worth it, because I believe that the quantity of Greek is going to be important to get to that point where I'm able to sight read and understand it better. The other thing is the perspective of not just zooming in on one church father here or there, to be able to say, okay, we have the consensus of the church fathers is important. And so this really is the goal that any Christian scholar should have, is let's actually read everything, really understand the perspective of who these authors were, why were they writing, and what did they write about, and not just zero in on one specific text and try to pretend like you know what it means. The counsel of all of them is really important. So that's going to be one of my goals, one of my main goals in reading through these and having a journey in reading through everything as much as I can. So that is sort of my, if you want to call it a New Year's resolution, we can say that, but also just put it out there that these are my goals. I'm not just randomly reading various and asunder Greek texts. I actually do have a plan, what I'm going to read, when and where and why and how, and even starting maybe juggling 7 or 8 different texts keeps me from getting too bored, because some of these are pretty brutal, especially if I decide to read, I don't know, let's say I decide I'm going to read through all of Against Heresies by Irenaeus. That's going to take a long, long time. And I think it's going to be easier for me to juggle, reading a little bit of Irenaeus here and there, and then going back to something more interesting and then juggling back and forth. So that's kind of the idea. Juggle the readings back and forth, and try not to get too brutal and kill the joy by just reading all 10 books of Against Heresies. I think some of it's going to be pretty fun, but some of it's going to be pretty discouraging, because it's so boring that you don't know what it's talking about. And I've read some of Against Heresy. Some of it can be interesting, some of it's boring. And so having that spaced out, where I read some of Against Heresies and then some of, say, St. Polycarp's writings, or the letter of St. Ignatius to the Ephesians again, or the other letter to Polycarp. That's going to be a little bit more interesting, a little slower, a little bit shorter. And altogether, I think it'll come out with the more interesting, developed presentation. And maybe some final comments I could say is, somebody could say, well, why are you presenting this, reading it aloud? Because Greek would say, you have an American accent. I don't speak just like a native Greek. And if I'm not Greek, I wouldn't be necessarily using the ecclesiastical pronunciation. So there might be this problem. Who is my audience? And I would say the audience that I'm intending is both Greek Orthodox Christians who might, yes, they will know that I have a very pronounced American accent, but they can follow along and understand what I'm saying. And if that's the case, I believe that I have an audience with Greek Orthodox Christians. And then as well, I would say any non-native Greeks who are learning Greek for the sake of church history. and for the sake of reading the church fathers, I would like to be let's just say, some type of a mentor on how to go about reading them, and not just zooming in on, a few sections and translating, but actually going full blast. We're reading the church fathers. We're doing everything. And I think that's something that we don't have enough people like me that are just sitting down and reading the text aloud. Whether or not I have an accent, it doesn't matter. The text is important. Read it. Try to understand it the best you can. Sometimes I've been reading with English and then Greek back and forth. Sometimes I'll just read in Greek. And that continual reading, sometimes with the translation, sometimes without, that's what's important for any true Greek scholar to make it to that next level. And for me personally, I believe I have a long ways to go, but that the amount of Greek that I've read within the past year has extremely been helpful, especially reading it aloud. And it's been extremely helpful to get to the step that I'm trying to get to, and that is that I'd like to be able to read faster, more fluent, and be able to comprehend at a higher comprehension rate. And those are things that are possible, but only possible with somebody that's not a native. Well, even if they are a native, it's only possible by reading a lot of text and being able to cross into the imagination with comprehending, visualizing these words, and being able to do that at the speed of reading aloud. And I think if anybody can benefit from my presentation, whether they watch just one or two of my videos, skip through them, or whether they do a marathon, the goal of this channel is just to show what is possible. And that's pretty much it. So thank you again for watching. And hopefully if I've inspired a few of you, and if I have not inspired you, I hope that the spark will start later, and I will eventually inspire you in the future. So thank you very much for watching, and I will be back later with reading, and I will see you then. So bye for now. Have a happy new year.